Welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to explore a really profound historical and spiritual source. We're looking at excerpts from The Inner Treasure of the Guru's Ambrosial Nectar, which was written by the first Sikh guru, Guru Nanak Dev Ji.
Yeah, it's an incredible text.
It really is. And the goal here isn't just to, read a centuries-old script, but to decode what it actually tells us about human psychology,
Hmm.
like the exhausting nature of our daily habits and where true fulfillment actually resides.
Right, because it's surprisingly relevant.
Oh, totally. But before we get into the text itself, I want you to think about this for a second. Have you ever spent days, or maybe even months, trying to solve a seemingly impossible problem, only to realize the answer was sitting right in front of you the whole time?
Oh man, yeah.
Like, it's like turning your entire house upside down looking for your keys in a complete panic, right?
Yeah.
Only to discover you've literally been gripping them in your left hand the entire morning.
I mean, it is a deeply humbling experience, finding out you were the source of your own frantic search. And it's just so universally human.
Yeah.
We are practically wired to look everywhere exactly where we are standing. We project our solutions outward, assuming that if we just find the right object or the right place or the right external circumstance, the internal problem will magically vanish.
Exactly. And that sets the stage perfectly for what we are looking at today, because what is so striking about this material, and specifically we're looking at an excerpt from Sorat'h, section 598, is that its psychological diagnosis of human nature feels like it could have been written this morning.
Yeah, it really does.
It tackles this exact phenomenon of obsessively looking outward for things that, well, that can only be found inward.
It tackles it with zero hesitation.
Yeah.
And we should probably pause in the context for a second because the formatting of the text matters a lot. You mentioned Sorat'h. In the Sikh tradition, scriptures aren't just meant to be read like a standard textbook. They are intrinsically tied to music. A rag is a classical Indian musical framework designed to evoke a very specific emotional state.
Oh, fascinating. So it's not just words on a page.
Exactly. And Rag Sorath specifically is traditionally associated with a feeling of deep, motivating energy. It is supposed to spark a sense of seeking, of like waking up from a slumber. So the text isn't just delivering information, it is actively trying to shift your psychological state.
Okay, let's unpack this then. If the goal is to wake us up, where does the text actually begin its argument?
Well, it starts with a really stark warning against superficiality. The text uses this incredibly visceral imagery to make its point. It says, "Renounce costumes, disguises, and clever tricks. This fruit is not obtained by duplicity."
Wow. Costumes and disguises.
Yeah, and then it asks a piercing question. It says, "If within you is the great filth of greed and falsehood, why do you bother to wash your body on the outside?"
That image washing the outside while completely ignoring the inside is just so potent. It makes me think of someone putting a fresh, really expensive coat of paint on a house that has a completely crumbling foundation.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right, like you might appease the neighbors, the house might look fantastic from the street or, on a curated social media profile, but you are directing all of your resources and energy toward a structural problem that simply cannot be fixed from the outside. The paint doesn't keep the roof from caving in.
That analogy hits the nail on the head because it highlights the misdirection of energy. The text uses the word duplicity, which points to the gap between how we present ourselves to the world and what is actually going on in our internal landscape.
Yeah, that gap is where all the stress lives.
Precisely. From a psychological perspective, maintaining that fresh coat of paint, the disguises and the costumes, requires a massive cognitive load. Think about how exhausting it is to curate a specific persona at work,
Oh, I know.
or on social media, or even in certain relationships. The text is pointing out the sheer absurdity of trying to hack your way to spiritual or psychological peace while carrying that heavy cognitive burden. The fruit, which here represents ultimate truth, or that ambrosial nectar, cannot be attained by putting on a show. The external just cannot purify the internal.
Okay, so if all these external actions, the costumes, the clever tricks, painting over the crumbling foundation, if they're ultimately useless for finding this inner peace, we're kind of backed into a corner here.
We are.
So where exactly does the text redirect our attention? Because clearly the external strategy is a total bust.
It redirects us inward, and it does so by stating a core thesis really plainly. The text says, "By searching around on the outside, you shall only suffer great pain." And the counter to that is, the ambrosial nectar is found within the home of your own being.
The home of your own being.
Right. The ultimate treasure isn't a destination you can map out and travel to physically. It is an internal realization.
See, here's where it gets really interesting, but honestly really difficult. I have to push back here on behalf of human nature.
Go core.
The text says, searching outside causes great pain, and it commands the mind to remain steady and not wander away. But isn't it inherently human to wander?
Well, yes, in a physical sense.
Right, like we evolved as hunter-gatherers. Our brains reward us with dopamine when we explore new territories, learn new things, seek out new resources. Exploration is quite literally how we survive. So why is this text so adamant that wandering outward is practically a guarantee of suffering?
That distinction is crucial. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to separate physical or intellectual exploration from existential wandering. The text isn't telling you to never leave your house or never learn a new skill.
Okay, that's a relief.
Yeah, it is talking about the pursuit of ultimate fulfillment.
Yeah.
Why does searching for that outside cause great pain?
Mm-hmm.
Because the external world is inherently unstable.
It is entirely out of our control.
And transient. If you tie your core sense of peace to external things, wealth, status, the approval of other people, or even specific relationships, you are attaching your foundation to things that are guaranteed to shift, fade, or disappear altogether.
And the moment those things change, you crash.
Exactly. That is the great pain. Psychologists refer to this as the hedonic treadmill. You acquire the new job, you feel a spike of happiness, that feeling normalizes and fades, and suddenly you are forced to go wandering again for the next external hit, just to maintain your baseline. The text is trying to intervene and pull you off that exhausting treadmill.
It's an evolutionary mismatch, isn't it? The same drive that kept us alive on the savannah, like constantly scanning the horizon for the next resource, becomes a source of deep anxiety when we apply it to our search for inner peace.
That's a perfect way to frame it.
We end up hunting for spiritual fulfillment like we're hunting for berries, just completely externalizing the process.
Which brings us back to the phrase, within the home of your own being. Think about what a home represents conceptually. Safety. Exactly. Mm-hmm. It is the place where you can take off the costumes and drop the performative disguises. The text is arguing that the essence of life, the ultimate truth, is already residing in your most authentic, unadorned self. You don't have to go acquire it on the horizon.
You just have to stop painting the outside of the house long enough to walk through your own front door.
Yes. Beautifully said.
But, and there's always a but, walking through that door requires the mind to remain steady. And keeping the human mind steady is like trying to hold water in your bare hands.
It's nearly impossible.
We get distracted, we lose our focus, we inevitably get lured back into the external world to seek that quick dopamine hit. So if the goal is to look inward, what happens when we inevitably fail?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the text anticipates that failure perfectly. Mm-hmm. It doesn't present some sanitized, idealized version of the human experience where you just decide to look inward and suddenly everything is tranquil.
Which is refreshing, honestly.
Very. It deals directly with our repetitive mistakes. It says, renounce corruption and seek virtue. Committing sins, you shall only come to regret and repent. And then it delivers this incredibly striking line. It says, you do not know the difference between good and evil. Again and again, you sink into the mud.
Again and again, you sink into the mud. Man, that hits close to home.
Right.
When I read that line in the source material, I immediately thought about the friction of our daily habits. It's like being stuck in a loop. So what does this all mean for our daily lives?
Give me an example of a loop you're thinking of.
Okay, like you hit the snooze button in the morning, knowing full well those extra 9 minutes of fragmented sleep won't actually make you rested.
Oh yeah, a classic trap.
You know it's going to make you late, which will make your commute stressful, which means you'll start your workday anxious and irritable. You know the exact trajectory of the suffering, but in that split second, you choose the temporary comfort anyway. And then, just like the text says, you regret it. You sink into the mud of your own making again and again.
The snooze button is a very relatable micro example of a macro problem. But notice how the text diagnoses the root cause of this repetition. It doesn't say you sink into the mud because you are inherently evil or permanently broken.
Okay.
It says you sink into the mud because you do not know the difference between good and evil. In a modern psychological context, We would frame this as a lack of deep discernment.
Wait, let me stop you there because that sounds like a contradiction. We do know the difference. Like, I know hitting the snooze button is a bad idea. I know doom scrolling on my phone for 2 hours instead of sleeping is a bad idea. We have the intellectual knowledge.
You have the intellectual knowledge, sure, but in the moment of friction, you lack the embodied discernment to feel the truth of it.
Oh, embodied discernment.
Yeah. You mistake the temporary gratification, the warmth of the blanket, the dopamine of the social media feed for actual nourishment. You mistake the avoidance of immediate effort for actual peace.
Wow, that is uncomfortably accurate.
The text argues that we thrash around in this mud repeatedly because our internal compass is broken. We constantly mistake the fake fruit for the true fruit. And the mud isn't some divine punishment handed down from on high. It is simply the natural, inevitable consequence of moving through life without clarity.
And mud is sticky.
Exactly. The more you thrash around blindly seeking external comfort, the deeper you sink.
That changes the framing entirely. It's not about being punished for a moral failing. It's about the natural consequences of being disconnected from reality. But the text also pairs this observation with a command. It tells us to renounce corruption and seek virtue.
It does.
Now, for a modern listener, terms like corruption and virtue can sound very preachy, almost like a Sunday school lecture.
They definitely can. But we need to look at what those words actually demand in practice. The text specifically calls out greed, slander, and falsehood. If we look at this through a psychological lens rather than just a moral one, we see that virtue here isn't just about being a quote-unquote nice person. It is an attention management strategy.
Wait, really? Virtue as an attention management strategy. Walk me through that.
Think about what greed and slander actually require from you. Gossip and slander require you to focus your mental bandwidth entirely on someone else's life.
Right.
Greed requires you to obsess over acquiring external objects or status. Falsehood requires you to maintain the exhausting cognitive load of a lie or a disguise. All of these corruptions are inherently externalizing behaviors. They eat up your working memory.
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
You simply cannot turn your attention inward to find the ambrosial nectar if 100% of your psychological bandwidth is tied up in external obsessions. The text demands you drop these behaviors because they are the very things keeping you out of your own home.
That is a fascinating way to look at it. You literally don't have the RAM available to run the software of self-reflection if your system is bogged down by greed and gossip.
Exactly. Your system crashes.
So recognizing that we are stuck in the mud and recognizing that our external fixations are eating up our attention. That is step one. But how do we actually pull ourselves out? How does Guru Nanak Dev Ji instruct us to actually access that inner nectar?
The text provides a very specific path forward, but it introduces some specialized language to do so. It instructs the reader to chant the Immaculate Name under Guru's instruction. Only then will your innermost being be emancipated.
Okay.
And it later adds that through the true word of the Guru's Shabad, you shall obtain the true fruit.
Wait, let's pause right there. Immaculate Name and Guru Shabad, for someone who hasn't studied Sikh scripture, these terms can be completely impenetrable. What exactly are we chanting, and what do these terms mean practically for you, the listener?
It is essential to define these. You're right. Name literally translates to name, but in its spiritual context, it refers to the divine essence, or the ultimate reality and truth that permeates absolutely everything. It is the core truth of existence.
Okay, and Shabad?
Shabad translates to word or hymn, referring to the divine wisdom or instruction given by the guru. So when the text says to chant the name through the Shabad, it is not talking about mindlessly repeating a magic word to get a wish granted.
Right, it's not a spell.
Not at all. It is talking about actively, continuously aligning your mind with the ultimate truth through the wisdom of the teachings.
It sounds like an active process of recalibration. Like you are using this wisdom to constantly remind yourself of the truth, pulling your attention away from the mud and back to the foundation.
It is an intensely active discipline. You have to do the rigorous house cleaning. You have to actively throw out the greed, stop the slander, drop the disguises, and focus your attention on the truth. That takes immense conscious effort.
Which is hard work.
Very hard. But here is where the text introduces the ultimate paradox of spiritual wisdom. After demanding all this active effort, the final verse shifts its tone completely. It says, "As it pleases you, you preserve me, dear Lord. Servant Nanak sings the praises of your Shabad."
That shift is jarring. We go from renounce your corruption and rigorously clean your house to, as it pleases you, you preserve me.
It throws a lot of people off.
I mean, the ending sounds like complete passive surrender. How do we reconcile the intense active effort required to get out of the mud with this ultimate posture of just accepting whatever happens?
You reconcile it by understanding the mechanics of control. True emancipation in this framework requires a delicate balance. You have to do the work, but you must surrender the outcome.
You do the work, but you surrender the outcome.
Exactly. Think of it like agriculture. The active discipline, removing the distractions, managing your attention, studying the wisdom that is the equivalent of tilling the soil, pulling the weeds, and planting the seed.
Okay, you're doing the groundwork.
Right. That clears the mud and builds the vessel. But you cannot force the seed to grow by yelling at it. You cannot manufacture the rain.
Oh, that's so true.
The ultimate realization of peace, the actual tasting of that ambrosial nectar, is a grace. It is a profound surrender to a reality larger than your own ego. As it pleases you, you preserve me, is the ultimate psychological relief. It is the moment you finally put down the crushing burden of trying to micromanage the universe.
The relief of putting down the burden of control, when you phrase it like that, it brings everything full circle.
How so?
Well, the reason we wear the costumes in the first place, the reason we use the clever tricks, the reason we exhaust ourselves on the hedonic treadmill is because we are terrified of our vulnerability.
We absolutely are.
We think if we just control our image enough or acquire enough things, we can manipulate the world into giving us safety. And the text is saying the harder you try to control the external, the deeper you sink into the mud.
And surrender is the antidote to that panic. I want
Yeah.
to be clear on the psychology of this, though. Surrender, in this context, is not a passive giving up. It is not collapsing in defeat.
What is it then?
It is more like the difference between thrashing frantically in the ocean and finally learning to float.
Oh, wow.
Right. Floating requires intention. It requires you to align your body with the water, to stop fighting the current, and to trust that the water will hold you. When the text tells you to accept as it pleases you, it is teaching you how to float. It's an act of trust in the steady foundation of your own innermost being.
That is a phenomenal distinction, thrashing in the mud versus choosing to float in the truth.
Yeah.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to bring this all back to you, listening right now, moving through your everyday life. What we've seen today is that while this text is hundreds of years old, human architecture really hasn't changed.
Not one bit.
We still get intensely distracted by the costumes we wear. We still desperately look for external fixes, a promotion, a purchase, a perfect social media post to fix an internal sense of emptiness. And we still find ourselves repeating the same exhausting habits, sinking back into the mud of our own confusion.
But the flip side of that equation is equally true. While our flaws haven't changed, neither has our access to the solution. The location of the inner treasure remains exactly where it has always been.
Yeah.
It doesn't require a plane ticket, and it doesn't require a new disguise.
It just requires you to stop painting the outside of the house and finally walk through the door.
Right.
So we want to leave you with a final thought today. Something to mull over on your commute or while you're washing those dishes or maybe before you go to sleep tonight. Think back to our very first question about searching your entire house for the keys that are already in your hand.
Such a frustrating feeling.
If the ambrosial nectar, that ultimate peace, that steady grounding, that true fulfillment you are so exhausted from searching for, is already located inside the home of your own being,
Yeah.
what is the one disguise or clever trick you are currently using in your life that is blocking you from walking through your own front door?
What is the costume taking up all your attention, keeping you from simply being?
Something to think about. Until next time.